Have you ever felt that your business is a little complicated? That if you could just simplify it just a little bit, get it so that the client pathing is going well, that the whole team is making everything just go singing so that you could leave for 90 days and come back and not see the sheriff's notice on the office building or the factory, or better yet, that it's running better? Well, I'm John Bowen. I am bringing you a great episode of Accelerating Entrepreneurial Success because I have a very good friend who does just that. He specializes in helping entrepreneurs like you and me really simplify their business. Dan Kuschell. Dan, I got to tell you, I am so excited to have you with us because you and I have been friends for a number of years now. You've given me all kinds of advice along the way, and I feel phenomenal that I get to share you with the world because you've been kind of a secret for a few entrepreneurs. So first of all, thank you for joining us, Dan.
Well, it's a real honor, John, to be with you here today and also AES Nation, and certainly looking forward to it.
Well, and we've got a big opportunity here, and I want to dive right in and share. Dan, tell me what it is you do. I mean, because everybody, if you're not excited about simplifying things in life, you're missing something. I know a lot of people, non-entrepreneurs, want to make life more complicated, but entrepreneurs want it as simple so that they can just accomplish major, remarkable things. So how do you help that?
Well, I think the best way I can describe it, John, is there's the quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes that goes, "I wouldn't give a fig to be on this side of complexity, but I'd give my life to be on the other side of simplicity." And so what I feel I have the ability to do is take big, complex ideas and really simplify them down, overall. I've been able to do that not only for my companies over the years, and I learned a lot of this by making a lot of mistakes. I've run, about 8 different companies, and in my early years, I made a bunch of mistakes. At one time, I had over 5,000 independent sales reps working for or with me, and then I had a big, large series of companies working together, 5 different companies where we had about 200 employees. And I found myself maybe like a lot of entrepreneurs at one point where, oh my gosh, I don't have time. What am I doing? And dealing with overwhelm. And so I really went back and started studying and putting practices in place that allowed me to simplify, the management structure, the operation structure, the finance structure, the marketing, the sales. I guess what pops up is a book from Michael Gerber years ago. I was introduced in my 20s that I lean back on, and Michael teaches this idea that systems run your business. Find good people to run those systems, and I know you're a master of that. I mean, I'm just extremely grateful to be a part of what you're doing and seeing all the great things you do and running your organization with mostly virtual people and really dominating the financial field and transforming the people in your industry's lives.
Well, no, I appreciate that. And this is where, one of the things I look at it, we need a lot of help from our friends. I mean, Michael Gerber also was one of my earliest really mentors. Hired him shortly after he did the E-Myth book, and just a phenomenal guy. I've done some webinars with him, and I will definitely invite him to be on the podcast. But, what I want to touch on the concept of simplification for a second. And let me frame it, because on the quote, I think a lot of us mix that there's 2 types of simplification. There's a simplification that's kind of dumb. It's kind of where we first get into business. We don't understand how complex things are. So it's on the wrong side of complex. And then there's, after you understand all the issues and then you simplify it. That's a simplification, the right side of complex. So Dan, help me out. How do you get there? I mean, we're talking with successful entrepreneurs that have real businesses that are, whether they're manufacturing widgets, they're professional service, could be in the information marketing, wherever they are, as they built up $5 million, $10 million, $15, $20, $100 million of revenue and beyond, there's some complexity. How do they deal with that?
Well, I think one of the biggest things, John, is that it's what game are you playing? Is identifying that at the core. What game do you want to play? And from my background, I come from a sports background. As a kid, my dream was to play pro baseball, and I had a career developing. I had some injuries. Then I ended up, after playing semi-pro ball, I coached college baseball, summer teams, all-star teams. And one of the key things was to have the right players in the right positions. I mean, you don't put a pitcher at the position of catcher unless you want to experience a losing streak, and vice versa. You just have to have the right players in the right position. But even more than that is identifying what role do you play. I mean, there's a different role if you're a first base coach or a third base coach or the head coach, and better yet, if you're the general manager of the team, or better yet, is the owner. And what I found, John, and maybe like you, is sometimes because of, maybe a lot of false beliefs or false programming that we've been taught as kids, that we find ourselves, many owners find themselves in the day-to-day operations of their business and having a hard time of letting go of some of those. And I know I've experienced that too over the years, and having trust and faith in being able to delegate. But the reality is, if you're a general manager or owner of a baseball team, you're not out playing shortstop. You have a shortstop like Derek Jeter out there performing for you at the highest level. And that's one of the most important things. A, understand the role you play. And number two, I would say one of the core success factors, if you will, that I've learned and had to really hone in on over time is to hire the best. I want to hire Derek Jeters on my team. I want to hire the Justin Verlanders, so to speak, or if you translate it to other sports like football, Tom Brady at his peak. But every talent has a shelf life as well. And as the owner, like Jerry Jones of the Dallas Cowboys, you've got a quarterback, right now who is arguably one of the top quarterbacks potentially in the game. But in a few years, that talent's going to erode a bit. And you've got to be able to replace and replenish that talent. So it's always an evolving process. And I know that's what you've been so good at, is not only evolving with your team, but also evolving your strategy in the business. For me, John, I look at the core of how a business is structured. And again, it comes back to really simplifying things as well. And I could go off on about
let me jump in, because I want to do two things. One, I want to go back to one of the businesses you did where you were leading the charge and putting it together, and then I want to go to where you've now come in and where I've met you. Yep. Is you're leading the charge for a very good mutual friend of ours, yes. Joe Polish, and he's created a great marketing empire, and he was in the center of complexity too, and you're helping him move out of that. So tell me kind of the big breakthrough you first had, because I mean you enjoyed some really good success, how you went through that and put in the systems in place and the right people on the bus, if you will. And then let's go to Joe's business as well.
Sure. And so I'll speak about the breakthroughs from two folds. One, from a marketing and selling point of view, is number one is to be involved in direct response marketing. I think that's one of the most important factors as business owners, entrepreneurs, that we can really see transformational results in our business when we take the time to get good at that. Number two is the structure of the organization. For years, I built structures and hierarchies, and I've seen a lot of hierarchies in companies. And at the end of the day, I come up with in my own head, and I'll share it with everyone here, is a simple structure to keep in mind in running the company. Number one, at the top, you have usually it's the entrepreneur owner, which we'll call the visionary or the driver of the company or the business. And then either below or next to, however you want to look at it, you have someone that is the facilitator or executor of the visionary ideas or driving ideas that are being shared. Then compartmentalizing the business, and we'll call it four main areas overall. Sales, number one, marketing, number two, operations, number three, and finance, number four. And putting someone in charge to be able to operate them. Where I've seen a lot of companies, where my companies had struggled, where I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs' companies struggle, is they try to be up here as the visionary and down here driving the sales piece of it, or the marketing piece of it, or the operations or the finance. And better strategy from what I've discovered is to be able to put someone in charge to be able to handle that. And then you can just have huddles with these people that are ideally experts. They're your Derek Jeters, they're your Justin Verlanders, the best at what they do at that moment in your particular company. So that's one side of it. In Joe's side of it, I've been able to come into his org. I mean, he's an incredible visionary, as you know, right?
Oh, fantastic.
A brilliant marketing mind, a brilliant thought leader is probably a better way I would describe him. And I've been positioned now into a role to help simplify things. And so I see my role as the facilitator and executor, supporting those ideas. And then we've got people in charge of sales, marketing, operations, and finance. And because of looking, and we're always refining it, we're not perfect either. I don't think it's always an evolution. we're working to get better and better all the time. But I think that at the core would probably be part of the biggest breakthroughs I've experienced and seen others experience too.
No, I mean, that's really good. And when we look at it, I mean, we're trying to put these blocks together, and it's never perfect. And when we start businesses, the visionary, you're not, there's nobody to fill in. You don't have enough money, so you're just, you got the blocks, and then the problem. So many of us entrepreneurs who have started our businesses, don't realize the value of professional managers, really talented people who still have that entrepreneurial spirit coming in. And relinquishing control a little, it's hard. I know.
Yes.
My team tells me it's hard for me too. and I've had several businesses as well, and and every time I do it, when they really kind of push me a bit and they're ready to accept responsibility, boy, magic starts happening. Let's switch for a second and talk about magic. And I mean, you're an extremely, you're an unusual operating guy, Dan, I got to say, is that, you are pretty creative. I mean, actually, pretty would be the wrong word, very creative. And a lot of the operational people that I've worked with, I don't want them to be creative. I want them to put the systems in place. And you kind of bring both of those together. But tell me, what you're most passionate about you're working on right now, and share with our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing, John, number one is I feel my real gift, like I shared, is taking complexity and simplifying it. And what I seem to do really well is to be able to integrate marketing and operations together, which is, and culture. And I think when you bring the team together with integrating with great sales and marketing, I mean, transformations happen overall. Speaking to one of the transformational ideas that I discovered is when you speak to large groups of people at a time, kind of like the platform you're building here with the podcast. I mean, I can only imagine through AES what you're doing, and AES Nation, the hundreds and thousands and potentially millions, if not multi-millions of people that you're going to impact and transform their entrepreneurial lives through what you're doing. And so this is a great example of one of those parts of the technique. The other is to speak to large groups of people at one time, and then put yourself in a position where you do the work one time and get paid over and over again. The reason I bring up these two strategies is because I think of you and how well and how effective you are at doing just that. So through the podcast platform, through your webinar platform that you've been able to develop and build, and really create an automated system. So for me, I love building these types of models and integrating those models. And what I'm doing right now with Joe that I'm really excited about, I get to work with one of the great thought leaders of our generation, in my opinion, and the great connectors. I mean, I know you've been able to meet, and I know a lot of people that you'll have through AES Nation, like Peter Diamandis, Dan Sullivan, who you work a lot with.
Yeah, I mean, so many of these people I met through Joe, and I consider myself actually a pretty good networker. I'm going to go okay networker relative to Joe. I mean, he's the master at this. And what's so powerful, Dan, and we get together in mastermind groups. We're doing some projects together and so on. But what I love, and it's hard to do, and this is where I reach out to you and have the call with you versus Joe, is talking about those systems, because it's one thing to create. What we all want to do is get people to raise their hand to consider working with us, to explore working with us. And then we have to have a good customer path or client path, no matter what we're doing, that if they're qualified, that we can bring in and deliver value, over-deliver value for them. And that's where, I mean, I love that what you do is you think big. And you're thinking, okay, can we get those systems in place and then really expand them? And I see you doing that for Joe.
Yeah, I mean, we're having a lot of fun being able to do that. And I feel I have a pretty strong background with being able to do it, because we had built, our companies did, fairly decent amount of revenue, $20 to $25 million a year. And we had an ability to take people that were customer service oriented type people, and in a way, with our unique approach to things, turn them into salespeople, which is quite a unique approach to building a business. And with Joe, what we're doing now is we're really looking to build a model where people actually buy into it versus being sold into it. And there's a lot of pieces, as you know.
Tell me what the difference of that. When we talk about somebody buying into something versus being sold something, those are, very different cultures. I mean,
Very different.
why do we care?
That's a great question. I mean, think about the experience. I think that people love to buy things or own things, but they hate to be sold, or pressured is probably the better. Joe did an incredible video that's on YouTube called Is Selling Evil that people can check out. And it is selling evil. He kind of talks about really the psychology behind it. But when someone buys in, they're essentially enrolling themselves into the process. Whereas when someone is being sold, there's usually a third party or some other person that's really convincing, or it's the difference between being compelling versus convincing, John. And so what we're doing, I think it stems back to Joe, one of Joe's top values, which is education-based marketing. That we want to be into a conversation with someone that's predisposed, pre-qualified, pre-interested, pre-motivated, and pre-ready to do business with us, because we've already shared incredible value that in many ways has transformed their life. So that'd be the best way I could describe it.
Well, and I think this is for, let's just take for all the entrepreneurs that are joining us today. I mean, I wish we could all sit around the table and have a cup of coffee
exactly.
or a beer together, kick this around, because I've learned so much hanging out with the right people that are going through these same challenges, and the ability, kind of some thoughts. I mean, the ability to today's world to expand and get the reach is huge, and this is Dan, you and Joe and others have taught me, and I mean, the podcast you guys are doing is just phenomenal success, and I'm going, geez, I need to bring out a different message, and that's what we're doing here. But also, and this is something everyone that we're taught, that you're here, you need to figure out how you're going to get more hands in the air. I mean, I don't care what you're selling, so on. Qualified people raising their hand to explore working with you is one heck of a lot better than I coach financial advisors. And when we coach financial advisors, they're working with the affluent, people with $1 million or more financial assets. And what happens is the average affluent person today is getting 4,000 marketing messages a day. Somehow you have to filter that out, and shouting louder is not it, but attracting them by giving tremendous value in advance is huge, and then having that systematic way to deliver a great experience. That's really what we're talking about, isn't it, Dan?
Absolutely. In fact, Dean Jackson, I think he calls it, taking that term that you just shared, value in advance, he calls it results in advance. I mean, in the financial field, imagine, I know this might be a utopian idea, but imagine if a financial advisor was able to work with a client in advance up front and help produce a tangible result ahead of even a commitment being asked for to work with them.
Well, in essence, they do that through presentations, through white papers, ebooks, webinars, and what we teach. And our fellow entrepreneurs who are watching and listening, what I'd like you to think about is what could you do in advance, whether you're selling widgets, whether you're selling that are $25, whether you're selling $1 million pieces of equipment. How can you differentiate yourself from all the noise in the marketplace systematically? I mean, I know that when we do a webinar, it's going to get X number of hands in the air that will result in about 50,000 or more of revenue. So I like running them very regularly. And it's, people are coming to us versus the other way around.
And I know, I'll share something, John, that one of the things that transformed my entire business career years ago that I think feeds in line with what you do and what you teach advisors. One of the differentiators for me that worked extremely well, that I see can work for a lot of people, is simply writing a book, because it positions you as a preeminent expert. I mean, today to be able to get a book published, like this, a couple 100-page book. I was fortunate enough to be with Tom Hopkins, Jack Canfield, and a few others. That was really cool. I mean, it's a few bucks per book. And what I did is I actually got the book published. Then I went on radio and created a 30-minute, essentially value-oriented event, put it on radio, then we sent it out to multiple stations all over the country and drove to an 800 number of people inquiring where they're calling us because of what you just described, the attraction mechanism, the attraction factor. And now we had that lead. Now we put them into a value-added sequence where we could follow up with them with education-based marketing. Then we drove them to an application, if you will, to see if they wanted to engage further in a higher level relationship. And we were able to enroll people into different types of of coaching, different types of services, different types of products using that simple mechanism that started with something as simple as a couple 100-page book. Then a simple radio thing that essentially you just write a check for to buy the radio time in different markets across the country to generate, ultimately what became thousands of leads a week at one time, to then enroll them into higher level type programs and services.
I mean, once you map all this stuff out and you test it, I mean, that's the beauty of today's technology. We can test it, we can see what's working. And it almost becomes, you can put in a quarter and get $1 out of the slot machine, and you can, ramp up the marketing to generate whatever volume of business that you can deliver great experiences on. I mean, it is amazing.
Yeah, and the other part is I think in today's economy, people want to know, and I know you teach this as well as anybody. It's about unique. What do you do that's unique to anybody else compared to anybody in your marketplace, and what differentiates you? And so the better material, the better resources, and for example, the tools you provide to advisors that are looking to advance their businesses and do better with what they do. I mean, I look at the white papers you provide, the webinars you provide, the support you provide, the tools, the resource. I mean, it's phenomenal what you do, and you're just a great role model for people to model, not only for the financial business, but in any type of business.
Yeah, and so, if you're watching us and you're here at this point, or you're listening if you're on the audio podcast, I mean, what I want to encourage you to do is, Dan and I get really excited about this stuff because we know it works and we want you to do it too. And, like I can track the very first book I did. It was in the early 90s, and it really was a big turning point in my career. And now we stamp out ebooks about a minimum of every quarter. And, they're not, I mean, today's tools of putting together certainly an ebook is a heck of a lot easier than, doing any of these books that we did in the 90s. And
oh, yeah.
So, Dan, let's come to, we have a segment where we ask, our guests for, their application of the day, the idea that they want to share with their like-minded, successful entrepreneurs who are driving and everything else. Is there an app that jumps out at you that you want to share?
An application that jumps out for me, I think, overall, would be really the idea of simplicity versus complexity, John. Really honing in on what that means.
I'm going to go with, that's the entrepreneurial insight of the day, where it's the actionable idea. But I'm thinking about technology on I don't have my smartphone here, but on my smartphone, an application. Is there any application you're using that you just love that other people should be aware of?
As crazy as it sounds, I don't know that I have an application that I absolutely love.
Yeah, well, I know you like systems, so most apps don't work that well.
Right. So I'm always embarrassed to say that I do work with a lot of apps that I like and they're okay, but one that I love, I don't know that I really actually have one that I truly admire and just love.
Well, so let me go with the key takeaways that I'm getting, and I want you to add some color to this or make sure I'm getting it right. I use the term right side of complexity, but you run right to the getting it simple. And a lot of visionaries, CEOs. I've been CEO of a number of businesses, most of which I've started, and I just have this awful habit of making things complicated. And, I surround myself with people who really are good at keeping me thinking simple and on the right side of simple. And then second thing that, I really saw is, the ability that once you get the simple or systems in place, there's kind of two areas that we can really leverage. The first is getting more people to raise their hand. I mean, you guys have done just such a great job of creating systems around attracting. I look at some of the material you've shared with us on, you're running all these ads on all these major publications, and to the penny exactly what the revenue is that it's bringing in, all the different systems, so that, guess what? Things that aren't working, you stop doing.
Right.
And things that are working, you throw more money at it. And, I look at that, and then the third thing is the delivering a world-class experience. I mean, I've been involved with you guys. You guys do it consistently over and over again. So there's that whole client pathing that you really do a phenomenal job. So the three takeaways: simplicity, have a consistent way of attracting the right people and then delivering the value. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, no doubt about it, John. I think one of the things that pops up for me too is, as entrepreneurs, one of the best things that we can do is protect our confidence, right? And having a team that helps do that is a key part of building that success. And in fact, I have a little formula that I created for my own reminder, which I'll share with everybody here, which is maximum performance equals execution times ideas times confidence. See, if you take any one of those out, like you can have great ideas and poor execution and great confidence, but your performance will be off. You can have great confidence, great execution, poor ideas, and your performance will be off. So it really takes all three: execution times ideas. And admittedly, I actually stole that piece of the formula from Dean Jackson and Joe Polish directly. And then I added the confidence piece because, as entrepreneurs, sometimes it can feel like a lonely place. You're writing checks, payrolls, X number of dollars, etc. But when confidence is high, ideas are at their peak, and execution is at its peak, that's when we get maximum performance. And it's creating a winning environment to be able to do just that. And I've seen and noticed that most of the successful entrepreneurs, if not all the entrepreneurs that are having the best success, are in that space more times than not.
No, I love that. I have not heard you say that before. And I mean, execution, we're talking about the system.
Yes.
Ideas, we've got to be creative. We've got to differentiate ourselves from the market. And I actually think the third element you brought in is the most important, is confident. You've got to recognize that you're capable of doing it. I mean, if you're not, that's fine. But there's no one in the world that isn't insecure at times, have a moment of self-doubt. That's what the marketplace is all about. But by really being focused and letting the market give you feedback and refining each of those others and hanging out. I mean, matter of fact, this would be a good time to talk about some of the resources, but hanging out with other people, other resources. I mean, what you find out is you're insecure, but everybody's insecure a little bit. And so the opportunity is to get together with a group of entrepreneurs who share values, who really want to make a big impact and deliver value. One of the groups, I'm going to put up the website. The first one I'm putting up is Joe's Genius Network Market Mastermind Group. And Dan, I mean, why don't you give us a little background on what this is and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, I'd love to, John. The Genius Network, or what members have now called it and turned it to, is what we call a 25K group, and people can go to 25kgroup.com for that. But what's interesting is I'm a team member with Joe, but originally I was actually a client. And it's like that old hair club commercial. I think I'm not just a member, I'm a client. So I kind of feel that way representing Joe here. And it's a place where the highest level entrepreneurs play at their best, and they're able to take their game to a whole new level because they get access to more connections, better ideas, as well as access to best practices and strategies, just really, in my opinion, not available anywhere else. I remember
I'm in it, and I love it. I mean, I've been in it for the last 4 years, and I write a check every year for $25,000. I don't like flying. I fly down to Tempe to hang out with you guys, and tremendous value.
Yeah, and it's almost hard to describe, because calling it a seminar, calling it a networking group, or an event type thing, or a gathering, it almost does it injustice. Until someone's really a part of the group, it's hard to explain. But like when Joe originally was creating it back in, I think it was late 2006, early 2007, I remember he called me and said, "Hey, thinking about starting this group. It's 25,000. Do you think you want to be a part of it?" I said, "Well, actually, if I write you a check, I'll probably show up at your office more." So I was one of the first people that cut him a check, and I think I've referred about a dozen or so people, colleagues, entrepreneurs, fellow clients, to Joe in the group, and it's been transformational for all of us. I was in the group for many years, and then when I sold the main core of my companies in 2009, I took a break really to be a full-time dad, And about 2+ years ago, depending on when someone's seeing this recording or hearing it, Joe basically said, "Hey, why don't we figure out a way to work together?" And it's been a great relationship. So I'm a big ambassador. I'm a big fan, and
well, and a user in the sense of you're out there now. You've taken the strategies that you're refining with Joe, and let me put up your company as well that you're just launching here too. Why don't you tell us what you're doing there?
Someone can just go to dankuschell.com. Follow me on Facebook, and we've got some different resources, educational tools available as well.
Well, Dan, I want to thank you. I mean, this has been great. For those that want even more resources, we have at Accelerating Entrepreneurial Success, or AES Nation. We're building this great community of entrepreneurs. You can go to AESnation.com and get access to the video, the audio podcast, as well as a transcript of all of this and the link to the resources along the way. The power of Skype just died for a second there, so I'm going to wrap up, and it's been a great interview. I'm going to thank Dan and thank you. Now go out and make a difference. Wish you the best of success. Your current clients and customers, they're counting on you, but more importantly, if you're going to build all these systems, your future clients as well. All the best.
Thanks, John.